the Green Group's support for both Amendment 218 and 219. And I would very much associate myself, particularly with the remarks of the Noble Lady Baroness Jones of Whitchurch as she moved 218, referring to the lack of collective bargaining for agricultural workers in England as exceptionally damaging. And indeed, as the Noble Lord Whitty commented, the loss of the Agricultural Wages Board was a real disaster and something that I also opposed at the time. Where perhaps I have one cause for some pause is an appropriate supply of seasonal agricultural workers. I think we also need to think, as a number of noble lords have reflected, that a heavy reliance on seasonal workers is not necessarily a way to produce fair, decent jobs, a well-populated countryside, strong communities in the countryside. What we want is people who are resident year-round, having good, solid, reliable jobs. And we also need to think, and we seldom think about this way when we're talking about agricultural work, but agricultural labour should be able to be something that fits in with the desire that many people have for part-time working, for flexible working that suits their needs. Back in 2013, I was at Fruit Focus, a horticultural field days, and speaking to a grower there who was reflecting, I think, back in the 1970s, talking about how, as it was then described, housewives, students home from the holidays, people would come out from the towns into orchards that surround them, work as and when they could. Now that, of course, requires a very different sort of agriculture, a very different sort of food system, supply system, something the supermarkets would have a great deal of difficulty with. But that's a way in which we can ensure that people have the opportunity to earn money, labour is available. And I'd contrast that to a report in the Times newspaper a couple of weeks ago, reflecting on, as many noble lords have, the way in which the lack of workers from the European Union and beyond arriving this year has caused difficulties. And that was an asparagus grower who said, well, you know, British workers just won't do 12 hours a day of backbreaking work. Well, my lords, I don't believe that we should have a food system that relies on anybody doing 12 hours a day of backbreaking work. We need to ensure that these are jobs that a reasonable range of people can do over a reasonable range of their lifetimes, and that needs to fit in with people's capabilities, capacities, and the skills, which, of course, as this amendment alludes to, very much need to be developed and grown through far more education and training. Now, I do particularly want to reflect also on what Lord Naseby just said about he was referring to mutuals being involved in supplying housing for workers. I think we also need to look at cooperative models, encouraging and supporting, assisting in the growth of cooperative models of food production, of food growing. I cite, for your noble lord's house might be interested in looking at, for example, Organic Lee, not very far from where those of you who are sitting in the house are sitting, a cooperative that's growing good, healthy fruit and vegetables, and ensuring that its workers are part of a whole team. And I do also want to commend the noble Lady Baroness Jones of Whitchurch for her inclusion of reference to mental health care. And I do think we should perhaps think about the fact of an issue I've been raising elsewhere in your lordship's house about the building industry and the fact that levels of mental ill health in the building industry are epidemic and truly awful levels. We need to make sure that these essential jobs, we've been talking a lot about key workers recently, builders and farm workers are very clearly key workers, and they need to have good, stable, secure jobs that can last through a working life, that fits within people's practical capabilities and gives them a decent life, decent wages. So I commend both of these amendments to the House.